At the hazard of reading too much into a preseason game, I feel a lot better about some things with the Texans right now after their game versus the Raiders, and I'm still concerned about a few other areas. DeMeco and CJ spoke after the game, as they tend to do after football games, at least ones in which they play, and we did get to see CJ Stroud in this game. After some vacillating from anonymous sources or sources close to the team that were at one point claiming that none of the starters were going to play after the injury to Jaden Higgins. And then we've learned that, of course, the starting offensive line, or at least a bunch of guys who are capable of being starting offensive linemen, or maybe that's what they're going to be. We'll get into that in a little bit. And CJ Stroud himself would play. The initially reported as 20 to 25 snaps. They ended up playing one series, and it was a really good series. It was the starters, or at least the starting offensive line, and CJ Stroud and Woody Marks versus a bunch of Raiders backups. And CJ spread the ball around to various receivers, including Woody Marks himself, which, of course, we want to see more of. I thought CJ looked like he was making good decisions. He looked calm, cool, and collected in the pocket, did it with pressure in his face from a blitz, and looked like he had anticipated the blitz. And the offensive line, I thought, looked really sharp mentally. I thought their timing, their coordination, how they worked with the guy next to each other was all on point, and it was way better than what we saw last year this time. They had gotten to that point, especially in the run game towards the end of last season, and then that Steelers playoff game. It all evaporated with the injury to Trent Brown in the playoffs, and you saw just how critical a guy like Trent Brown or just a solid right tackle can be, because they were a different team versus the Patriots. To get into some of what DeMeco and CJ said last night, here's DeMeco asked, did he see what he wanted to see out of CJ Stroud, who right now, the over-under on FanDuel is 3,550 and 1/2 yards. I think the Texans are going to run the ball a lot this year, as long as they're effective doing it. But I think that's going to complement the passing game. And that CJ, who would have been on track for 3,550 yards last year if he had just stayed healthy all season long, I think he's going to have a better year this year. How much better? I don't know. But this is DeMeco on what he saw from CJ.
By playing CJ, I wanted to see him come out, get some live reps with the first offensive line, just see him get in rhythm, have some efficient plays, and he did exactly what we expected him to do. And that's the reason you just go get those live reps for him. So it's not the first time that they're rolling out versus Buffalo.
Yeah,
the first offensive line.
Well, yeah, the timing and everything else that goes into it, 100%. I'm glad that he's going to get some full speed reps before he gets out to Buffalo. It sounded almost like that. That means he's not going to be playing in preseason game number 3. It's not like he was ever in risk at risk of getting injured or something in that game last week. But you know how that goes. You can't quite predict these things. If we could, we wouldn't have so many damn injuries. The run game and CJ's involvement in it, there wasn't necessarily anything too complicated in that game the other night, but the Raiders were blitzing, and the offensive line handled everything really well. I thought there was one play where CJ had to make a bunch of adjustments before the snap, and I believe that ended up being the one that the Raiders were penalized, so it didn't end up being a play called. I might be mixing that up, but that part of it, the operation, everything I've told you guys that we're seeing during training camp and the practices, I think we saw that again when CJ was out there. I do almost wonder if part of the evaluation process for the offensive line, for DeMeco included, okay, I want to see these guys operate with DeMeco at the helm, because that's the most realistic we can get in evaluating these guys. What's it look like when the guy who's actually going to be accepting the snaps from whoever the hell the center is, what's it all look like when those guys are together? And it looks pretty sharp. Here's DeMeco when asked about the offensive line that was out there. So as a reminder, Ariante Ursary at left tackle, Keylan Rutledge at left guard, Evan Brown at center, Ed Ingram at right guard, and then Trent Brown at right tackle. This is DeMeco on whether, hey, is that the actual starting offensive line?
As you guys know, I talk about it constantly. We move guys around to make sure we got our best 5 guys out there. So to see that, you got to see guys working together, see guys getting those reps. So that's indicative of the group you saw out there today. Those are the 5 we went with today. Those guys have done a really good job. So we'll see how they keep building and moving forward.
Okay, so I could read into that in a million different ways. I feel like he said, we'll see how they keep building that moving forward. And DeMeco, without having watched the film, wouldn't know exactly, who had a good game, who had a bad game, where were the issues. I think on that first drive when those guys were all together, the one bad run play was really the fault of Xavier Hutchinson not getting in front of a blitzing defensive back, but that play itself was blocked up really well. And if Woody Marks hadn't gotten tackled in the backfield, I think that could have gone for definitely positive yards. That one was probably at least 5 yards. And then we know that we know that Woody can break tackles, especially if it's a defensive back tackling him. So I thought those guys looked good. I think Evan Brown is a capable veteran with experience. And the big question really at this point is, wow, Wyatt Teller really is struggling, huh? Like I'm very, very patient with offensive linemen. And I think both Ed Ingram and Wyatt Teller haven't looked like the best versions of themselves early in camp. Ed Ingram, I think, might be working on some things, and also he's already proven in this system. Where I suspect with Wyatt Teller that there is a little bit, perhaps, of an old dog learning a new trick in the way that Cole Popovich wants things to operate, and sometimes that's easier said than done, especially when a guy's been doing it the same way for a long time. For whatever reason it is, or why, or maybe it's just age or lingering injuries or what have you, Wyatt Teller at this point, I think, is a backup offensive lineman until further notice. We'll see. Maybe something changes. Maybe they roll out a different group or a different configuration on Friday night next week, and we'll see something different. But it sure feels like with how they looked out there that's probably going to be the starting offensive line. One really positive guy where I guess positive development out of camp has been Marlon Klein. And I've talked about it here. I think you've seen it in the preseason games, and it's both as a receiver and as a blocker. And I'm really hopeful for him as a blocker because he's doing some really good things already. But one of the most impressive things he does is when he's a little bit out of position or hasn't used perfect technique and he's still getting the job done. He might not have great hand position and he might not have low pads, but he's still just straining and using his core and his legs to pivot on guys and to seal them off. That's been really encouraging. Here's DeMeco on Marlon Klein.
Marlon's done a really fantastic job all camp. I see a guy who's steadily been climbing. Right? We throw a lot at him, and he's handled it really well. He made some plays tonight. He continues to show up and make plays. He makes them in practice. It shows up in the game, and he'll continue to get better. I love his effort. I love his willingness to grow and take coaching. Like, he's a fun guy to coach. He absorbs a lot of information. He goes out there, takes the coaching, puts it to work, and you see the improvement. And that's what I love about coaching, is seeing guys improve, take coaching, and Marlon is one of those guys that gets me excited.
Yeah, and I think DeMeco has really liked Marlon from the beginning. I mean, immediately after the draft, he was asked a question maybe about Marlon Klein's blocking ability or what have you, and DeMeco really leaned into, hey, he's got ability as a receiver. He's got this catch radius. Made some tough catches in college, catching passes from I almost said rookie quarterback, a freshman quarterback. Although they are professional athletes above the table these days. So rookie or freshman, he got some hospital balls at times at Michigan and really is starting to figure it out with the blocking. The interesting thing about Klein is that the last couple times I've heard CJ asked about Klein, CJ is a little bit tougher of a teacher with this pupil, I think, because CJ doesn't sound as effusive with the praise, and this is not a criticism of CJ at all. I think this is his honest appraisal of where Marlon Klein is right now.
Yeah, he's getting better. I think he's learning, how to run NFL routes. I think whenever he knows what he's doing, he's great. So just, trying to teach him on, what I'm looking for, and I think he's getting better.
Yeah, okay, so that wasn't criticism at all, but it's a point it's a fact. He's a rookie. He's not going to know everything about the nuances of route running yet. And I just flash back to last year when I think CJ probably got excited about Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, except the problem was that they're still rookies and they didn't really understand how to run routes, where they needed to be, and precisely when they needed to be there. They weren't operating with that same level of precision, which, by the way, is a big buzzword for DeMeco these days. They say precision a lot. And you can imagine they might want to focus on precision after things went the way they did on offense last year. So the precision in the route running, it's not going to be there yet. It'll keep getting better because Marlon Klein just keeps getting better. But I think CJ is probably hesitant to really put too much trust or faith in any rookie until they really prove that they can be out there doing it. I think Marlon Klein's going to get chances, for one, because Jaden Higgins isn't there anymore. And the Texans did today sign Zay Jones, not Zay Flowers. I'm going to have to keep telling myself to say Zay Jones, and Sterling Shepard. So two veteran receivers, like vet receivers, who haven't been super productive the last few years. And I don't know what their plans would be for them necessarily. I think they want to be sure they've got veteran guys who can run the offense the way it's supposed to be run. Do they make the final cut, or does this displace somebody else? I wouldn't go that far just yet. See how they play it out and how these guys look when they're in practice. But it is interesting that they signed two guys after one receiver, Jaden Higgins, got injured. I would assume that would mean they figure, okay, maybe one of these guys will work and we'll like him better than some of these younger guys. But they still also have to worry about whether, if they cut Lewis Bond, would he be able to clear waivers and the Texans could sign him back, or does somebody else take a crack at Lewis Bond? We'll see. We'll see over the course of the next week of practice, and then obviously in training camp. So here's on a positive note from DeMeco. They didn't ask CJ Stroud about Kaden McDonald, because even though Kaden went to Ohio State, I think CJ would say, look, it's not really my area of expertise. Okay. Don't be asking me about the defensive tackle. Kaden, as we remember, didn't have an awesome first game. Did a couple of good things and made one nice tackle, had another jump on pile, I think, versus the Chargers. But there were a lot of times where he was getting knocked around a little bit. He looked a bit uncomfortable. I did a video on him on my own YouTube, basically urging patience with Kaden, because I can tell, having been through it myself, the things that they're working on with him. And sometimes it can kind of slow you down and gunk you up a little bit, because you're trying to have your stance perfect. You're trying to get your hand placement perfect. Felt like he let loose a little the other night, Thursday night. Here's DeMeco on Kaden McDonald.
The guy tonight, Kaden McDonald, right? To see him take a huge jump from week 1 to week 2, and see him come through with the big sack. I was very proud for Kaden. Right? He needed that play. He showed up in practice making plays like that, and to see him get that sack, I was very happy for him tonight.
Will Anderson was very positive on Kaden McDonald when he was asked about Kaden in the press conference the other day. And Will has said he's kind of taken Kaden McDonald on as his pet project, somebody he wants to keep working with. He feels like he's a veteran now, a true veteran, where he needs to take these young guys under his wing the same way the defensive tackles helped out with young Will Anderson, because Sheldon Rankins is like a mentor to Will Anderson. Will Anderson, as a defensive end, can now give back to the defensive tackles and take care of Kaden McDonald. I haven't watched the End Zone All 22 yet, but I do think that he got that sack, which I know he wasn't blocked completely because there was a miscue, but he took advantage of the miscue. And for a big guy like that, it's hard for big dudes who have a certain athletic profile. Kaden McDonald isn't the quickest footed guy out there. He's not like a Tommy Togiai or a Sheldon Rankins. It can be hard sometimes to take that leap of faith and just fire off the ball at the line of scrimmage, because you almost feel like you're getting out over your skis, and it can be a little scary. In particular with some of the techniques they ask those guys to do. But him showing the athleticism to take advantage of that half step that he had on that guard, but then also looked like he had a better feel and understanding for NFL style double teams, and just how well you got to anticipate it and anchor down and be more of a brick wall in the run game. They had a few moments where it didn't work out perfect, but I think week over week, it was a big improvement over what he did last week. So I'm happy for Kaden McDonald, because I've told you guys before, he's out there before practice. He's out there asking for extra work, taking extra reps. It looks like he's got the right work ethic. And as a 325-pound guy in this heat, it's impressive. It's impressive if you're asking for extra work. That's why he and Keylan Rutledge are impressive, damn it. Now, another guy that did a really good thing last night, but DeMeco is being brutally honest about these players, and the guys that he really likes, he's pretty effusive in his praise. The guys that he might really like, but he knows if they've got work to do, like Wade Woodaz, he's going to praise him for the good things, but also point out, like, hey, Wade's got some things he needs to clean up. But for those of you who missed the game, huge touchdown reception by Wade Woodaz. It was 60-plus yards, whatever it was. And you could see the athleticism, the speed, the length. He's just a taller, lankier kid. Not lanky in a bad way necessarily. He's lithe. He doesn't have the same physique as Henry To'oTo'o and Azeez Al-Shaair. He's built like a pure athlete. But when he's making big plays like that, awesome. Made a tackle at the line of scrimmage that I thought was pretty impressive. There's other times where he still looks a little bit indecisive, a little hesitant to come up and A, declare that it's run, and then B, pull the trigger and get downhill and stop the run. I don't think it's a lack of an appetite for physicality. I think, like with a lot of young linebackers, he's just thinking through things consciously instead of really trusting his reads and going right now. Here's DeMeco on Wade Woodaz.
And for Wade, he just has to be disciplined with what we're asking him to do. Like that pick came from him just being where he's supposed to be and finding a way to catch the football and go score. So he just has to continue to improve. Rookie, we're trying to get him a ton of reps, and he's done a good job with what we've given him.
Yeah, and he was asked another question about the fact that Wade Woodaz was pretty critical of himself, and DeMeco said more of the same, that, he's making progress, but there's some things in coverage. There was a one play, it was a reception on that first drive where nobody was really good on the defense. I think, but everybody was technically in position, but almost the way high school kids play zone defense. They drop to their spot and like, all right, I'm in my spot. What next? Not all high school kids, but just when you're teaching kids how to play coverage at first, it's spot dropping. You're dropping to a spot where in the NFL and then with the Texans especially, you're getting into your zone, but then you got to be feeling what all the route combinations are in front of you and around you to know where you can go to where you're needed most. And Woodaz probably could have kept getting a little bit more depth. If he did, he could have gotten his hand in the passing lane. He was in the right position on the field to get his hand in the passing lane. He just didn't have enough depth. But I would say the safety and the cornerback on that play were guilty too of being a step late on anticipating when and where the ball was going. These are the hazards of playing with the second and third team. The one thing about Woodaz that I'd be intrigued to see is what's the difference when he's out there, if they're playing their base 4-3 and he's out there with Azeez Al-Shaair and Henry To'oTo'o, and especially being out there with Azeez, those guys are really good at being dialed in to play action, to the tendencies, to all of those things. And there might be a little bit of an uplift or an uptick in how Woodaz plays when he's out there playing with the veterans. And he's done that during training camp, so they might have a feel for that themselves. But we're coming down to the wire now on the regular season, and as of yet, nobody has stepped forward to say, all right, I'm the third linebacker. Yep, it's got to be me. Like, they were still, as a group, pretty passive in attacking the line of scrimmage. I thought they did better, but overall, they just looked a little bit uncertain. And it's from a lot of guys that aren't uncertain dudes. They don't lack confidence or anything. They'll run around and they'll make some impressive plays, but it's not up to DeMeco's standard right now. And I trust that it will be. If I had to handicap who is the starter in week one for that third linebacker position when they're in base 4-3, I would say right now, I think it's going to be Woodaz, because they do like his upside, and they probably think that he's got more upside than the other guys out there who aren't really taking a step forward to impress anybody. So if you're not impressed by anybody and you believe in the guy that you drafted in the fourth round, you get him out there, and hopefully he makes more positive plays than negatives, and hopefully a pick six or what have you is one of the things that he can do to offset some of the rookie malaise that you might have. Ariante Irsary last year, was he technically better than Cam Robinson right at the beginning of the season? I doubt it. So, but you believe in Irsary and you want to get him out there, and he escalated it, or he ascended pretty quickly in terms of looking like a rookie to then, okay, looking like a kid that knows what he's doing. And I think Woodaz might go that route. This is DeMeco on the Jaden Higgins injury.
Very unfortunate news with Jaden going down with the torn ACL. He'll be out for the year here. And it hurt. Jaden is a guy I've highlighted. I feel like every time I've gotten up and talked, I've highlighted Jaden Higgins because of the work that he's done in OTAs, throughout training camp. He was like one of our best players, right? If not arguably the best player on the field when he's been out there. So it's a significant loss for us. We got a void to fill there, and it won't be easy to fill the void that Jaden is leaving behind.
damn it, I got to stop listening to these things, these people saying positive things about Jaden Higgins. He looked great. He looked like he was on track to really take off and be that breakout type of player, to win all kinds of postseason awards as the breakout player of the year, breakout player of week one. Last week, Nico Collins said that Jaden someday will be the face of this franchise. It was not flukish. It wasn't just some cool story, bro, from the first couple weeks of training camp. He really has formed a nice connection with CJ. I think as long as hopefully it was a simple ACL without any extra ligament damage or too much cartilage damage, then the nice thing about getting injured this early in the year is that he should be 100% completely healthy by training camp next year. But in the interim, who steps up? I don't know if there's a direct replacement for Jaden Higgins. Certainly not on the team. Jalen Noel can provide some of that explosivity, but it's coming from the slot, which still helps Nico out and, gives you more areas of the field to attack. But nobody on the outside quite has that same skill set or that same menacing athleticism and speed that Jaden Higgins does. I think the Texans, despite signing those two veteran players, will probably continue to kick the tires on guys like Kayshon Boutte and others. I'd be really surprised if the Patriots traded away Kayshon Boutte just because he's got a contract coming up. If they trade him, I'm guessing they would trade him to the NFC. But maybe Vrabel's cool with that stuff. Maybe he's kind of cocky enough that he doesn't care. His old boss, Bill Belichick, would trade with the Bills or trade within the division, and he just kind of had the philosophy that, like, all right, yeah, look, nobody's going to be as good as us, so we're just going to stop him anyway. I don't know if I'm going to put Mike Vrabel on Bill Belichick's level just yet, other than I guess Vrabel's got an older girlfriend or an ex-girlfriend, so maybe he's a little bit wiser. I don't know. That's just where we are. I don't expect Kayshon Boutte to come walking through that door. It'd be pretty cool if he did. I don't know what kind of compensation the Patriots would be thinking or demanding, but Kayshon Boutte is very familiar with the Josh McDaniels system, which is similar to Nick Caley, because Nick Caley was with Josh McDaniels and everybody else in that building who's ever taken a look at Tom Brady and thought, oh, thank God for that guy. Oh, he's making us all look like geniuses. So I'd keep an eye open for transactions like that. But I don't think that Nick, because he doesn't operate this way, I don't think he's just going to go out and say, we got to get somebody. I don't care. I'll pay any price. That's probably not in the cards. DeMeco and CJ were the only guys who spoke at the podium last night. A lot of people got interviews elsewhere, obviously. But the guy we haven't seen a whole lot of, other than a smattering of over the last few days, is Tank Dell, since we're on the topic of injured wide receivers. Some people have looked at Tank's recent absences, like Sean Pendergast and Cody Stutes and Landry Locker have all thought, okay, it's pretty weird that we haven't seen Tank these last few days. Maybe I'm just a sucker, or maybe I'm just a pie in the eyes dreamer. Wherever pies and eyes and dreaming are involved in that, just you go ahead and fill in the blanks. That they're going to be super careful with Tank Dell. They're going to take their time. They're not going to try to push him or anything. I don't think the injury to Jaden Higgins changes one bit of their plan for when to play Tank Dell and how much to use him, because that would be idiotic at this point, where their whole strategy has been, we're going to be as careful as possible because we don't want to have Tank have to go through this again, not to mention he wouldn't be available to the team. So they're being very, very careful. I don't think that a 3-day absence from the real physical work is a 100% indicator that something's up with him. It might be that maybe there was tenderness, maybe there was soreness. I have zero clue, but I'm not as optimistic as I was previously that he'd be available week one, but I'm still pretty optimistic that he's going to be available sometime during the season. I think the other signings we might want to watch out for are, no, I was about to say tight ends, but no, they've got at least 4 tight ends right now. If Cade Stover can do a bunch of work at fullback, and that's probably the group they're rolling with, depending on possibly Brevin Jordan and whatever his injury is. The other thing about the offensive line I wanted to hit real quick is the Texans have a 44.5 points total in that game versus the Bills, which feels a little bit higher than it should, given that people nationwide are pretty pessimistic about the Texans offense. I tend to be more optimistic. But they also know that the Texans are really good at limiting Josh Allen in those games. So even though I think the Texans offense is going to be better this year, I feel like it's a little bit of disrespect that they think the Bills are gonna, if they think the Texans offense is bad and the Bills offense is good, and the points total is 44.5, they basically are saying, oh yeah, Josh Allen will get 27 points or so versus that Texans defense. Not on my watch, buddy. All right, mister. So on FanDuel, if that feels a little bit high for you, 44.5 on FanDuel. But as far as the money side of the offensive line goes, because if Wyatt Teller doesn't work out, there's going to be a whole lot of people saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe they wasted all that money on an offensive lineman and it didn't work out. They didn't spend a lot of money. Would have been a great bargain if Wyatt Teller ended up being the same old version of himself. He's got $16 million over 2 years with $8 million of that guaranteed. The Texans right now are the 5th lowest in spending on offensive linemen. So Nick can afford to burn a contract or two as he's kind of trying to cycle through these veteran players and find guys who fit his system. Last year, Cam Robinson didn't work out. This year, Braden Smith and Ed Ingram, they did work out last year, and now they're here again this year. So Wyatt Teller, Braden Smith, not huge marquee signings. They also draft 2 offensive linemen. Look, in the draft, you draft a guy in the first round, you could draft a guy in the 4th round. If one of those guys works out, usually the first rounder, you don't cry a lot of tears about the 4th rounder not working out, because only about 25% of 4th rounders become full-time starters. I do like what I've seen from Wee Woo so far. So I'm intrigued by him, and we'll see how it goes. As we know happens on Fridays after a Thursday night game, my voice really starts to go. I do my morning show on Thursday, and then we do a pregame show for 3 hours on Thursday, and then we have our morning show again this morning. So apologies for the late podcast these last couple times, but now that we're blessedly done with these Thursday night games, for now, we won't have to deal with that anymore. Everybody have a great one, and thank you to FanDuel for sponsoring. Please like and subscribe if you've listened all the way to the end of this. Oh my gosh, you need to have more of Seth Payne and Believe in Texans in your life. So like, subscribe, leave a 5-star review or a 5-tardigrade review. Everybody have a good one.